Lou Henson. How you doing, Lou?
I'm doing fine.
So do you have the orange sport coat in the closet or the red sport coat in the closet and bring those out for the tournament?
Well, Dave and Elliott, I have an orange in Illinois, and I have a room just with Illinois, various things in there, and balls, etc. And down here I have a crimson sport coat. So whether I'm in New Mexico or Illinois, I'm all set up, ready to go. And of course, we spent 25 years or so here, and all the time at New Mexico State as a player and coach, and Illinois 21 years, and we spend about 5 or 6 months up there each year. So we have two good places to spend a lot of time.
So when you coached Illinois, you were here 5-6 months a year, and then the rest of the time you were in New Mexico?
No, when I was coaching Illinois, I was there all the time.
Okay, I was going to say, how do you coach a team?
That'd be a good deal.
Since I retired, I spend about half of the time in Champaign and half of the time in southern New Mexico.
Okay. So will you be following the NCAA tournament closely?
I'll tell you one thing. When I was coaching, I think I know more about these teams now that I'm retired than I did when I was coaching. I see every game. We have DirecTV. I pick up, and I'll have all the packages. I watch games from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Okay, so what do you make of Illinois' season?
Well, I think most people thought they would be up there toward the top of the Big Ten, and because a senior ball club, but they were up and down a little bit. At times, I think they could beat anybody. Then at times, they didn't play so well, and so I think if they play well, they've got a chance to advance in the NCAA.
How surprising is it when you think you have a team with senior leadership and it doesn't come through? They're just seniors. They might as well be freshmen, sophomores, whatever.
Well, and that happens some of the time. A senior ball club, and I think Bruce was very high on this team, but then at the guard play, I won't pick out any players, but at guard play they were a little inconsistent at times, and sometimes they just didn't play very well, and other times they played great. Gonzaga, they had them down about 20, and they beat a lot of good ball. North Carolina, they beat them, and I think Illinois is one of the best shooting ball clubs in the Big Ten. I really do. Now they're not quite as good defensively as they used to be, but offensively they can shoot.
But wasn't part of the problem that Coach Weber thought McCamey was going pro last year, and basically he had his guards all set up with Richmond, and then all of a sudden he's got McCamey, and you got to start the guy. But again, he hasn't turned out to be the player they thought he would be. They were comparing to Darren Williams, and all of a sudden this guy is lucky if he'll get drafted this year.
Yeah. Well, last year, at the end of last year, I think people throughout the country thought he was one of the top point guards in the country. It wasn't just Illinois, because he had fantastic games as a junior, and then he didn't play as well this year as he did last year.
So looking at the Big Ten in the tournament, Ohio State, a lot of people like.
Well, I'll tell you what, I really like Ohio State. I think they're a tremendous ball club, and I know Penn State almost beat them, Michigan almost beat them, a lot of people almost beat them, but they didn't. And Ohio State, I've got them going all the way to the final. And if I filled out a bracket here for the local newspaper, and I picked Kansas in the Final Four. The Elite Eight. I had them there, and of course, I think Purdue's got a chance to get there. I don't know. Probably top 16. I think Purdue will do well, but my top four was Kansas, Pitt, and Duke, and I think I had OSU in there, of course. But anyway, I look at the bracket. I'm more confident about OSU getting to the Final Four than maybe the others, because I think you got a pretty good bracket.
What do you need to be successful in the tournament? Is it you need the coach to coach at his best, or you need your point guard to basically take over, or is it a combination of factors?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. In basketball, it's a little different from football. People think that you get ready for a ball club and you make changes during games. I don't know of a coach in the country that'll draw out a coach who has any experience will draw out anything new during a game. You just don't do it. You do the things that you've been doing. You do them, and you might work a little bit differently on defense depending on what they do. But offensively, you're going to be doing what you're doing. And when you go into NCAA, and I was in there 18 to 20 times, we tried to just do the things that we did for the other games. And the worst thing you do is start trying to change at that time.
Can you explain to a team that hasn't been in the NCAA what it's like?
Well, it's a different experience going in there, because you can say what you want to and try to keep them on an even keel, but it's really hard to do because of the outside pressures and all the things that you go through. I think it's very difficult for a team going in the first time. That's why in the NCAA, experience is so important.
Are there coaches that you coached against who you couldn't stand, and when you watch them coach today, you just root against them?
Well, I try not to root against any coach. I favor the coaches, and I just enjoy watching sports. And a lot of the guys that I coached through the year started with Rupp and Iba and those people like that. And see, there are a lot of young ones aboard now, but I try to keep up with all of them.
Okay. Are there any schools you root against?
No.
You're not going to admit it, are you?
I'm not about to do that.
What do you think about what's going on at Illinois right now? Weber was always considered a great game coach, got the most of his talent, not a great recruiter. Now, all of a sudden, everything's shifted. He's getting these great athletes in, and now they're starting to question his coaching ability. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's good. Last couple of years, they've gotten some really good recruits, and I think a senior ball club, but then there's some young ones, and trying to work the young ones in. I think it was a tough coaching assignment this year, so I'm hoping that maybe they'll bounce back. And of course, losing those seniors, that won't help any next year either.
Now, have you had teams where there was great expectation going into the season, and that expectation was too much of a burden on the players?
Well, not to this extent, I don't think. Now we've been upset in the playoffs by people. You remember when Austin Peay beat us, but what people didn't understand, Austin Peay had played Kentucky at 2 overtimes. They had a great ball club, and we lost to them, and we've lost some NCAA games, but I think if you go a few times, you're going to lose to people that you think you're supposed to beat.
Jalen Rose has been in the news lately about talking about the Fab Five. There's this movie out, and he's basically saying that Duke only recruits certain athletes and that they don't want black athletes from broken homes. And Grant Hill took offense and said, listen, I came from a good family, 2-parent family, middle class. What is he talking about? Duke basically wants good players, but they'll take anybody. I think you're basically stereotyping Duke.
Well, I think that's right. I think Mike Krzyzewski will take good players, and I don't think there's anything to that at all, because he will take them. There's a kid, let me just say this, in Duke they recruit outstanding kids, I'll tell you that. I know they do. But there's a kid who wanted to transfer to Illinois from Duke, and so he told me, did I call Mike? And Mike said, yeah, go ahead and talk to him. Well, he came by to visit, and before he got there, I hadn't gotten his transcript. I got his transcript, and he was going back for his senior year. He had 1.7, and we couldn't get him in at Illinois. So I'm telling you, they have outstanding students, but it's like some of the other schools. Stanford, now, if there's a good athlete coming along, they make exceptions for those.
Now, with all the money that the NCAA makes off of this college basketball tournament, shouldn't the players who help provide a great degree of that entertainment receive something? I understand they get an education from all this, but it somehow doesn't seem fair to the players from a financial perspective. I'm
sure the players feel that way, but I don't think it'll ever happen, because how can you take 500 athletes at these big universities, and if you pay one sport, you got to pay all of them, and there's no way that you can afford to pay the athletes, and I don't think that will ever change. I believe it'll stay the same. It just doesn't work. Most of even your major schools lose money. Your mid-majors, 90-some% lose money. So there's no way that you could pay the athletes, because you'd have to pay all of them.
Okay, so we'll leave the financial payments to the booster clubs and the under-the-table stuff that's been going on since the days of John Wooden.
Well, I think if you paid them, I think you'd still have some of that. So that's inevitable. That will not come about in my lifetime, I don't think, because schools just can't afford it.
You know what? I was a manager of the basketball team at Loyola University, and I think the managers should all get scholarships because the amount of time we put in, and we didn't get scholarships. And I'm saying we're here as much as the players, if not longer. We're going to all the games, all the traveling. Pay the managers.
Hey, I agree with that. Managers, it is unbelievable work that they do. And at Illinois, I had managers, I'd had 4, 5, 6, and you know these guys went on and they got key positions now, and they did such a service for us. We couldn't have got along without them, and I agree with you. They should be paid.
Now, we know you're happily retired, but when the tournament comes around, do you say, you know, if I could just coach for the NCAA tournament, I'd take that job in a heartbeat?
I don't think so. Yeah, I've done my share of it, and I don't think I need any more. I sit around and watch the other coaches sweat it out.
Bobby Knight.
By the way, Terry Boers, what's he doing now?
He's still on radio at the WSCR in Chicago. Yeah.
So say hi to Terry for me. He's of course, I like to be around writers. I always like Terry a lot.
Yeah, good guy.
Elliott, you're a writer too, aren't you? In your spare time at the Sun Times?
In my spare time, yes.
Oh yeah, Sun Times. That's right.
Elliott writes the column with all the hot-looking girls in there.
Okay.
What do you think about Bobby Knight? He came out and said that if he got approached again, it was the right job. He'd come back to coach, and he's in his early 70s.
Well, I think he probably would, and I think he's at Texas Tech, and I don't think he thought he was going very far there. And of course, his son took over, and he is relieved of his duties this past spring, and so I think he might. But you know what happened to me? I retired. I was 64 at Illinois, and had a little bit of time on the contract, but and my last year at Illinois, we were ranked 10th or 11th in the country. We went to Duke, beat them, broke their 90-some game winning streak, and then we went to Hawaii, came out, only had one loss, like 12 or 13-1. And the very first game against Minnesota, one of the best guards I ever coached, Kewan Garris, tore up his shoulder. Then Hester got injured, another kid got injured, and we didn't do well at the end. And so that's when I thought I'd had enough. And so I talked with the AD, and I said, if you'll compensate me, I'll give it up. We had four sophomores starting, only one senior. And I knew the next couple of years we'd be pretty good, and so. But we only recruited one player, and the coaches were using my age against me, and so I thought it was about time to go ahead and give it up. Well, what happened? Kruger came in. They won about 22. Went to NCAA and did well. The next year they tied for the championship, won 22 or 23. But then that year he lost those guys. He lost 18 or 19 ball games. And I knew that we just couldn't recruit. And he had recruited some, but it still didn't help him when those guys graduated.
How are you doing health-wise?
You know, I'm doing really well. As you know, I've had some health issues. Perfect health until about 7 years ago when I had the bout with cancer, and then I got that in remission, and my chemo was so strong, I came down with viral encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, and I was in the hospital for a long time, and I had to take speech therapy for 2 or 3 years, as well as physical therapy, and my leg was paralyzed for about 6 months, and then after that, I could use it a little bit, and I'm doing pretty well now.
You're sure sharp as a tack talking to us. One last question. DePaul. Basically, they have been in the bottom of the Big East for probably the last 5-6 years. Do they belong there? Is this team still viable, or do you think that they should basically go mid-level?
Well, I just think that I can't believe that they've been down so long. I just think they can do it, but you got to have outstanding people all the time, and try to attract the top coaches. And I think if I had pretty good coaches, but I think there you got to have tremendous coaches to get that thing going. And I think it can be done.
Thank you very much for your time, Coach Henson. It was a pleasure talking to you. We really enjoy your insight in the NCAA and coaching, and I wish you were coaching my Loyola Ramblers right now.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Loyola. I'll tell you, we struggle with them because through the years, and I remember that team that won the national title. Cincinnati had about a 15-point lead with 12, 14 minutes to go, and it looked like they'd win their third consecutive championship. Loyola, George Ireland, boy, I'll tell you, they did it with that rebound shot at the end.
They're the only team from Illinois to win a championship, and every time Illinois loses in the Final Four, I'm happy because my Ramblers still have the title.
Well, sure, of course you are. Hey, guys, nice to visit with you.
Thank you.